Welcome to Review That Coffee. Our goal is to do a coffee from each state in the US to kind of start us off. Don't know how realistic that is, but we're gonna try. We got 5 to start with. So we're starting with a coffee from DAYGLOW. So I always was under the impression that DAYGLOW was LA based, and I think they technically still are, but in terms of roasting and their actual roastery themselves, I believe it's from Massachusetts. If someone in the comments can let me know exactly more about their roastery, I was having trouble finding stuff about it online. So someone please let me know. So let's get this cracked open. This coffee is in Ethiopia. It's washed Bensa Sidama, and we've tried this in a cafe before. No Free Coffee in Nashville was serving it on pour over, and we loved it. So we took it home, and fancy little shiny bag. So let's get it cracked open. Criteria that we're going to be grading the coffee on, and this is very informal. This is not us as Q graders or as people who are trying to say this coffee is bad or good. We're trying to evaluate the coffee for what it is and use our basic taste to evaluate. So that's what the coffee looks like. So from the basic perspectives of taste, we're talking about sweetness, sourness, acidity, bitterness, and umami. That's going to be the first thing that we're going to be looking at whenever we're tasting some of these coffees. And we're using that just because it's a good baseline of just understanding of what we're getting from the coffee that we can kind of all share universally. So that's the big thing that we're doing here too. For every video that we do, we're going to be starting with cupping. So we'll come over here, Dante, and we've got our little cupping station set up here. So we're going to start with doing that because it will kind of take out the variable of brewing and give us a more baseline. We encourage you to do this at home too. Whenever you buy a new bag of coffee, before you start throwing it on your V6C or your AeroPress or whatever you're brewing at, use a cupping bowl. And this is a perfect example of how you don't have to have technical cupping equipment to do a cupping at home. We're in our apartment here, and we have this Vero not neutral glass. It's a cappuccino size cup, so it's 6 ounces, which is great for cupping. A couple of spoons for breaking the crust and tasting. And we're going to use 15 grams across the board for all of these cuppings. And we'll measure just a little bit more so that we can purge in our grinder over here. And our grinder is set to what I would define as finer than V60. So finer than V60, finer than filter coffee. That's what I tend to like for cupping. And we'll go ahead and purge. And the reason that we do this is just to get any kind of residuals that was left over from a previous coffee that we ground or from anything else that's gone through this grinder. And we can also get just an initial smell impression. So that's that. So now we'll go ahead and grind the remainder of the coffee and get our water going as well. But before we grind, we will get our kettle going because we want it to be pretty fresh off the grind. We thought about doing formulated water, but my thought was a lot of cafes, honestly, as well as people at home are not using formulated water. So I wanted to do something that was as close to what the average person purchasing a bag of coffee from a roaster or cafe would be using, and filtered water is pretty unanimous among most home brewers. So that's why we're using filtered water. And we're going to be doing the same brew temp for all these coffees unless we see otherwise. Maybe if we see the coffee is darker or something, we might try to adjust. But we're just going to go to a nice 95 Celsius and cup and brew at 96 Celsius. So we're going to pour our dosage into our cupping bowl here. 15.5 grams, what we ended up with. I'm going to start my timer. And now we wait. Usually with cuppings, we wait between 3 to 5 minutes. It's kind of the general range. I'm going at 3 minutes. This coffee is really light, so I'm going to go ahead and go for it. We've had a nice crust that's formed, and that is ideal, so that whenever we're breaking our crust like so, we have a nice texture to work with. And, there's a lot of different ways to cup and different, people who will tell you different things. When you're cupping at home, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think if you get too caught up in that, then you're maybe missing the point, and the point is to just taste the coffee in its simplest form. Just gonna scrape the remaining crust and everything that's kind of risen to the top. We do this because we don't want to slurp grounds. That's not ideal. There is a lot of things about cupping, though, that will reveal to you a coffee before you even taste it. And that's not going to be covered in this video, but just something to keep in mind. Don't mean to say that cupping is unimportant or that you should do it professionally. I'm just saying, for at home, when you're evaluating coffees, this is fine. So let's talk about the 5 maybe main tasting elements. So we've got sweet. How about just write them down? Here, I'll write them down on the counter right here, just for everybody to see. And we'll just kind of go forward with all the videos in this way. So we got sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and umami. We can just rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. So sweetness, I think it's, what do you I mean, I lean maybe towards a 5 almost. It's incredibly sweet.
For sure. For sure. It does have some elements of like sourness, but it's very like fruit sour vibes. Absolutely.
So maybe kind of like a 3, if we're saying in the middle of the road for sourness.
Yes. Honestly, I would say saltiness is about a 2, but not in the sense of like saltiness as we think, but kind of like an enhancement in a sense.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. Umami, I get very little, maybe kind of towards the finish, and I think that's just because it's a little bit under extracted. And I think to me it's just kind of reading that way, and that's just because I was impatient and broke the crust at 3 minutes instead of waiting. I probably could have waited a little bit longer. This coffee is incredibly light and would actually benefit probably from formulated water, not just filtered water and some kind of crazy aggressive brew method. But that's besides the point. So umami, I'm just going to say like 1 because it had a little bit, but I don't really think it's truly representative. I think it's more representative of what's happening in the cupping dish and not so much what's happening with the coffee entirely. And then bitterness, kind of similar to maybe salty, where it was there, but more like a pleasant balancing kind of component.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I'd say the same, about like 3.5.
3.5. All right, we'll call it 3.5. So those are our final numbers for this first coffee from DAYGLOW. Of course, we're going to reevaluate these same numbers whenever we do the brewing, which we're about to get into right now. And we decided to use 20 grams of coffee, so we'll go ahead and pop that in our grinder. And for our brewer, so this might be a little controversial based on what we said previously with our water, or we're trying to match what someone's doing at home. Because we're going to be using the Sarah filter. This is a follow-up kind of idea that Dante and I discussed since we did the review of the Sarah filter. If you haven't checked it out, we highly recommend you doing it. It's a great brewer. We really love it. And I think it will provide a great control among all of these different coffees that we're going to be reviewing over this series, that I think using something like V60, because that would be my preference otherwise, or like a Kalita or AeroPress, might get a little bit trickier. So I wanted to just use this mainly as an excuse to use it more, because I think it really deserves more attention from the US market at least. So we're going to use it for that reason. So we're going to start by heating this up really thoroughly. It is porous stone, so we want to make sure it's nice and heated through. We're going to add our coffee to our heated up brewer. That's 20 grams. And we're going to do 20 grams in, 300 grams out for all of these brews. So with Sarah filter, osmotic flow is our friend, so we're going to go ahead and start pouring. We're going to do a just classic 1 to 2 blooms of 40 grams here. Really nice, slow pours. All right, so at 40 seconds, I'm going to go to my second pour, and I'm going to try and mimic this method for every review that we do. So I'm going to go 40, and we're just going to triple that. So we're going to go 4 times 3, so 120 will be our stopping number now. Stop it there. And the Sarah filter, I've been using it more at home just for my daily brews, and I would say that it does really great if you let the brew bag get completely dry in between your pours. There's been a few times where I get impatient, or I'm just, trying to make a coffee really fast, and I want to keep adding water like I would with like a V60 or something else, and it just really doesn't work as well. So we're at 1 minute and 25 seconds. I'm going to take this weight again, and I'm going to do another pour of, let's go to 220, so that would just be a 100-gram pour. And we can leave our last bit for our final pour. You can kind of see too here with my water line where I'm really trying to keep it on the same line. I don't want to go really high and like near the edges of the brewer because it'll slow down drastically from what we've noticed. I also took from our grind that we use for our cupping, I did go a good bit coarser because this brewer does love a coarse grind size. And it kind of is favorable for the kind of way you're pulsing your pours here and that sort of thing. So we're coming up on 215. At 220 is when I'm going to pour my final pour up to 300 grams. It's going to be about an 80-gram pour. Again, just nice and slow. I'm not really rushing my pours here. And let us know if you want us to review this coffee or any other coffee on using a different brew method, or maybe even kind of what I hinted at where during cupping, we talked about the 5 basic things that we tasted, but we just kind of know through intuition and through brewing over and over again, hundreds and thousands of cups at this point in our coffee journey, that we can kind of detect what needs to be changed to make the coffee shine the best based off of what we had with other coffees. So if you want us to see that kind of 2.0 of one of these coffees, just fire off in the comments and we'll make it happen. So we're at about 3 minutes and 15 seconds and we're looking nice and dry. Dante, if you want to kind of show the people what this bad boy looks like now that it's nice and dry. And you can see from the walls, again, where I was not pouring excessively high. If I'd been pouring higher than this, then the line would be closer to up here. And again, like I said, whenever I've been using this at home and being impatient, and if I get to that high line with brewing on this dripper, it chokes, it stalls, and it's just not super favorable. So that's where we are there. Our dripper is clean now, ready to taste. Smell-wise, it's definitely more floral than it was before. So number one thing that we want to be evaluating on this series is roast development and terroir expression. So kind of as stated in the disclaimer, we're looking for coffees that are being highlighted in the way that they're roasted. So, intrinsic qualities, this is an Ethiopia, it's a washed Ethiopia. If you taste the washed Ethiopias, you kind of know the general vibe for what they are. They're typically more on the floral side, less so than, or more so than a natural Ethiopia, which tends to have those characteristics of being fruity and like really fruit bomb. Dante, what would you say in terms of just roast development? Like, how would you rate it?
It definitely does taste like a wash. I can tell. It's very lightish. It's very light tasting. I almost don't taste that sour element anymore. Mm-hmm. But I think that's due to the filter itself,
right?
Or just the grind size in general.
Sure.
But as far as like roast development wise, it's pretty good. It's not like, I would say this is maybe like a light coffee.
Right. Yeah, I'd say. Again, I think if we had been brewing on something different, like the V60, we would have gone finer, really just our brew temp a little bit, and got even more of those floralities out. I will say that we tasted this in a cafe, and it tasted very different. It tasted like a natural, and it was brewed in a different cafe. They were using it at No Free Coffee on V60 Switch, and it felt like a very Tetsu Kasuya kind of recipe in the way that it was just so punchy. But I would say, in terms of, again, like the terroir expression, like what does this taste like a coffee that it's as we expect to? And I would say yes, this does taste like what I would expect, like you were saying, Dante. It does taste very washed. It does taste very Ethiopia. It has the florality notes. So in terms of like roast development and terroir expression, we're kind of doing this again on a 1 to 5 scaling rate. 1 being maybe unfavorable, 5 being the most favorable. I would say this is, I mean, getting near. It's not perfect. We don't say perfect, I guess, for this one.
Yeah.
You know, coming out the gates swinging, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say just based off of this evaluation, not doing any other further like really deep delves into diving this coffee in. I mean, I'm feeling strong at 4, like at least a 4 on this one.
Yep. I'd probably give it like a 3.8. So it's like
3.8?
right close to a 4.
Okay. We'll give it 3.8 then. I also love washed coffee, so this is like kind of my coffee. My bias is showing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's roast development and unique or terroir. So let's move to the uniqueness or surprise factor. Very low on the surprise factor.
Mm-hmm.
In the cafe, when we had it brewed up for us, it was definitely on the surprising factor. But I think just from, again, we're trying to evaluate this from someone who is perhaps buying a bag of coffee, bringing it home. I would say that it's not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
It's tasty, but I'm not like, whoa, this is a washed Ethiopia? I'm like, yeah, this is a washed Ethiopia.
Yeah, for sure.
So on uniqueness, do we want to rate it a 1 then?
Yeah, that seems about right.
Right. And then finally we've got drinkability. Do we want to keep coming back to this coffee, or do we want to just set it down after cupping and be like, all right, no more?
I'll find myself going back to it.
Yeah.
But if not, just to mess around with it more, because it still has a very like different taste.
Absolutely. So maybe not a 5 for either of us. I mean, I do really like it. I think the drinkability would have to come again with dialing it in more, like you were saying, kind of messing around with it. So how about we rate it at 3.5?
Yeah, 3.5.
So that brings us to the roast development. Just to recap, and the general terroir expression that we liked, 3.8 is that. Uniqueness 1, drinkability 3.5. That is our final numbers for this coffee. Before we finish though, let's talk again kind of what we did with cupping. We talk about, I might not put them in the same exact order, but sweetness, sourness, bitterness, umami, salty. That's it. We need to come up with a mnemonic to remember them. So I don't even remember what we reviewed them before exactly, but
so in cupping, I think we rated sweetness like
pretty high.
Sweetness was like 5. Do you still?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's still way up there. So sweet, you had a 5.
Like sourness, I think I've rated it like a 3 because of that sour. I don't really taste it now.
No, I don't either. I think it's really low.
No, I would say it's probably like a 1.
Oh. And then bitterness, I get more bitterness now, and more kind of mouth drying elements to it. So just a general astringency. So
honestly, I would say it's about a 2 though, because it's not very extreme.
No, it's not. It's more present than the cupping. But so you said 2 or 3?
2.5. I would say.
And then umami, I get like really
umami,
almost no umami.
Yeah, no,
so
that's gone.
I mean, it's not
that's gone. And saltiness, I don't really taste any saltiness either.
I don't know either. Maybe a little bit, kind of on the front end, and kind of how it feels on the back of my tongue. But I mean, I'd feel good saying 0 or even like 0.5. So very little. To go back to this section is to show how sometimes with cupping and then brewing, these sort of basic tastes can kind of evolve. And the reason for that, of course, is because we're throwing extra variables into the mix. So again, we changed the grind size, but we also did a different ratio with our brewing than we did with cupping. And all those things kind of compound on each other and make coffees taste differently. So I think that's a wrap for this first one. We'll have the kind of final numbers in the video somewhere if you're looking at this right now. And you kind of evaluate and maybe go purchase this coffee and try it for yourself. So thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit us up on Patreon for early access to videos like this and to give us ideas as well as have your voice be heard. So we thank you so much. Till next time.